wanted to hit record. Hi there, everyone. My name is Pam Yankeelove, and I'm the Director of Research at the Trager Institute. And we are so glad you are here today, part of our Project Echo community, which is in partnership with the University of Louisville Trager Institute and the Kentucky Coalition for Healthy Communities. And we are going to be talking about aging care today. So for the best engagement strategies we have to offer today, we ask that you keep your video on if at all possible. We do ask that you go on and mute yourself. If you want to share a comment or a question, you are welcome to raise your hand or chat or even unmute. If you're having difficulty with your sound or your video, we'll figure out a way to help you. Just go on and click on the arrow, though, next to your microphone or your video to test your system. And if you get kicked off, oops, sorry about that. If you were to get kicked off, you can go on and try to go on and join us via your phone or just turn off your mic or turn off your video if you're having some difficulty with bandwidth. We do ask that you go on and add your name and your organization to your little Hollywood video square. There's a couple ways of doing that. You can go on and click on the three dots in the upper right-hand corner of your video square, and you can click on that and hit rename and go on and change your name there. Or you can go on and go to the participant section and change it there, looking for more and then clicking on rename. We ask that you go on and do that just to help create community within our Project Echo. So if you're unfamiliar with the Trager Institute, the Trager Institute has a mission to go on and help individuals optimally age throughout their lifespan. We are a workforce development hub in which we are trying to change the attitudes, knowledge, and skills of our current healthcare workforce and our future workforce, healthcare workforce. We are also trying to engage in practice transformation, where we try to change how primary care clinics and nursing homes and emergency departments actually provide care, specifically thinking about age-friendly care. We also are engaged in community, so trying to, so when you actually spend your time either in your community or trying to seek healthcare professionals, we're trying to make all of those areas, all those concentric circles around you age-friendly. And we are engaging in a partnership with the Kentucky Coalition for Healthy Communities on our Project Echo. And so I'm going to share the mic with, I believe, Mona or Barbara. Mona Huff or Barbara Gordon? Let's see who's going to jump on.
Hello, I'm Barbara
Hi there.
Gordon. It is so good to be with you all this afternoon. We are happy to be in partnership with the University of Louisville Trager Institute, Optimal Aging Clinic, and the Kentucky Coalition for Healthy Communities have been around for many, many years working with communities to create support systems for older adults in partnership with existing local coalitions and organizations. And our goal is to develop the workforce and concerned community members to empower our communities to become healthier. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. And so if you're wondering what an age-friendly healthcare system does, is it really tries to focus on the 4 M's of care. And the 4 M's of care include asking our patients what matters most to them. Also looking to achieve mobility desires, making sure that the medication that we're on doesn't interfere with any of our other goals, and that we're not using high-risk medications, and we can just deprescribe when possible. And then mentation is the 4th M to the 4 M's of age-friendly healthcare systems. And mentation focuses on monitoring the mental and cognitive well-being of our patients and discussing concerns and preventing and identifying and treating and managing dementia and depression and delirium. So our 2024-25 schedule for our Project Echo, if you notice, we're in February. Feels like, we've been in this year for many, many more months than just 2. But Today, we are going to be talking about advanced care planning. And in March, we're going to be talking about restorative sleep, something I think we probably all need. It's one of the vital pillars for health and longevity. It's one of the 6 pillars for lifestyle medicine. So we're going to be doing that. And then we're going to be offering you a new slide that's going to share all of the other upcoming sessions shortly. So if you're unfamiliar with Project Echo was founded by Dr. Sanjeev Arora. He is a faculty member at the University of New Mexico. He is an MD and a specialist in hepatitis C. And he began Project Echo in 2023 and or 2003. So a very long time ago. And the idea was that he basically was noticing in his practice that individuals were driving 200 to 300 miles to see him as a hepatitis expert. And he wasn't really creating local capacity, and he felt that really wasn't doing service to those individuals. So he wanted to grow capacity and he wanted to grow the knowledge of those individuals at a local level so that they can actually attend to their patients. So he developed this telementoring platform. It is called Project Echo, and the idea is to move knowledge, not patients, and to build that local capacity. There are Project Echoes on every topic, and they're around the world that you can join in. They are case-based learning opportunities. And in ours, we teach best practices and interdisciplinary team-based care with a focus on optimal aging. If you are interested in having an attendance certificate, we can definitely provide that for you for 1.5 hours. We do ask that you go in and complete the evaluation at the end of the session. If there are any certified community health workers, you must complete the evaluation to receive a certificate. And our presenters have nothing to disclose, and our Project Echo is approved by the Kentucky Office of Community Health Workers for 1.5 CEUs for our certified community health workers. And today we have a panel. It's always exciting to have a panel. We are going to be exploring what matters most. We're going to have a panel discussion about advanced care planning. We have 3 individuals with us today. We have our own Justin Magnuson from the University of Louisville Trager Institute. We have Katheryn Higgins from Thrivent Financials. And we have Ada Rothrock from Heady and Son Funeral Homes. And by the end of the session, the participants will be able to understand the key components of advanced care planning, recognize the role of advanced care planning in helping older adults articulate and document their priorities, and then go on and apply these concepts to facilitate the completion of essential documents, including wills and powers of attorney and healthcare, surrogate designations, long-term care, insurance, and funeral planning. So much that we can learn in our session today.
Thank you,
Okay,
Pam.
so Justin, was that possibly your first slide? And I should have not done that.
It's okay. Teamwork makes the dream work, Pam. Thank you.
All righty. So if you want to, perhaps I would like to introduce Justin Magnuson to our colleagues. So, I mean, I do believe in purposeful redundancy, Justin, so I have no problem going through that slide again. All right. For those of you guys who don't know, Justin Magnuson, he's lovely. He has coordinated the Kentucky Boast Coalition since 2017 and managed education programs at the Trager Institute since 2018. The experience of being his grandmother's healthcare surrogate and longtime hospice volunteer has inspired his passion for contributing to programming that creates patient-centered healthcare providers and a healthcare literate public. When he is not in the office, he can often be found outdoor gardening and looking for birds. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Pam. So, really going to focus today on, advanced care planning, thinking about this. I'm going to be focusing very specifically on healthcare and how this fits into age-friendly healthcare systems. So we really look forward to the conversation and really look forward to what your questions are and how we can make this a tangible topic for you. So some key questions I'm going to be asking is, how does advanced care planning fit into age-friendly health 4Ms? What are the main documents related to healthcare, and what resources exist for healthcare planning? So A little bit of personal context. This is a picture of me and my grandmother by my blonde hair and my Michael Jackson t-shirt. I was probably 1984, 1985, which would make me about 8 years old. At that point, my family was very small, but at 8 years old, you don't really expect a grandchild to be thinking about their grandmother's healthcare wishes. I did know, and we'll be talking about funeral planning today. I did know that my mother's family was using cremation. My mother had been cremated. Very rare in the 70s to be cremated in the US. I think my family picked it up when they lived in Japan after the war. So pretty much that entire side of my family was cremated, and I think that they were introduced to that when they were in Japan. But at 8 years old, that's all I knew. I really didn't know anything about my grandmother's healthcare values. As I got older, I realized my grandmother was fiercely independent. And as my family slowly died, I had an uncle die and my grandfather died. Eventually, at 25, it was just myself and my grandmother. Grandmother was 80 years old, living in rural Indiana on a county road. She only had three neighbors that lived down the road from her. So, very rural area. She had a healthcare crisis. And at 25, I navigated the last 5 weeks of her life without really having any discussions other than some very basic discussions around that I could sign her checks, that she was do not resuscitate, and where her funeral preparations had been made. So that's what I had to navigate the last 5 weeks of her life. And really, it's been the impetus for me having these conversations and trying to generate discussion around how we improve both the skill set of healthcare providers and having these conversations, professionals having these conversations, but also the general public. So connecting this to the four M's, really going to zero in here on what matters most, but I want you to be thinking about over the course of someone's illness or over the course of their lifespan, focusing in on these other areas can really inform decision making. And making informed decisions is really what advanced care planning is about. And having people in your life that understand your values, understand wishes, and really know how to make those wishes come true if they can't make decisions for themselves or support them as they make decisions, really connects into all of this. And you start to realize that medications, for example, can impact mentation and mobility. Certain other decisions that somebody's making around what matters most to them could impact their mobility and mentation. So all of these play in concert to each other, but really focusing on what matters most to that person and really getting in and understanding what their values are can help to identify people that can help articulate this, put these plans in action. So the conversation by the numbers, and I'm just looking here at advanced care planning, 92% of it for healthcare, 92% of Americans say discussing end-of-life wishes are important. I challenge you to find 92% of Americans that agree on anything, but only 32% of the population have had a formal conversation around healthcare values and completed advanced directives. 95% say they'd be willing to discuss their wishes, and 53% say it would be a relief. So a lot of times what you hear people say is nobody wants to talk about that. The Conversation Project is showing that people would actually find it to be a relief. I looked and they have not updated their numbers since 2018, but I do know that the Conversation Project has hosted over 700,000 conversations. So getting people to talk about this is really at the core of what they do, and I'll be talking about some resources at the end that can help support this. So who needs to participate? Ideally, this is going to be individuals when they're able to make decisions for themselves. Again, my grandmother, when I started having to make these decisions, she was no longer able to make decisions, and we had not had many formal conversations about this. So ideally, this is a person when they're decisional, and then information in the advanced directive, such as a durable power of attorney or a healthcare surrogate, a spouse, adult children, parents, other relatives per next of kin laws, and friends should really be part of this conversation. If there is a court-appointed guardian, that person does take precedent. But realizing that it's really going to be people that are close to this person and have just the ability to make decisions on their behalf. Definitely want to include a physician of record and other family members, friends, social workers, nurses, chaplains to really be part of this conversation, really understand, the different stages of this. So there can be multiple people involved with this, but the idea is these people are going to be helping identify values and then honor those values as someone's capacity changes or when they're no longer able to make decisions for themselves. So in Kentucky, if we're talking about planning for healthcare purposes, these are the three main documents. There might be variations in different organizations that they might have their own documents, but the Kentucky Living Will document is something that I really believe that anyone over 18 should have. It does a couple of really simple things. Appoints a healthcare surrogate. Again, that's a person that would speak on that person's behalf if they couldn't speak for themselves. Basic levels of care, and then whether or not that person wants to be an organ or tissue donor. And it doesn't have to be completed by a lawyer. It can be downloaded off the Attorney General's website and completed by a person when they're decisional, and then witnessed by two people. So either two witnesses or a notary public can validate a Kentucky living will. If that individual who completes a living will knows they do not want to be resuscitated, that means if their heart stops and they are outside of a healthcare facility or a long-term care facility and they know that they don't want to be resuscitated, additional paperwork in the state of Kentucky is required, such as an EMS for DNR form or the Kentucky MOST form, which gets much more into the minutia of healthcare decisions beyond resuscitation. So these forms really work in concert to support someone's wishes when they can't make decisions for themselves. And a healthcare surrogate is needing to step forward and help make these decisions with the appropriate healthcare providers, either in a facility such as their healthcare team in a facility or first responders if they are outside of the facility. So we're going to have plenty of time at the end for questions and discussion. Here are some basic resources. The Trager Institute has a variety of resources here at the Optimal Aging Clinic. Our providers can have advanced care planning conversations. We also have an elder law clinic that can help with some of these conversations and help with some of the conversations that Katheryn is going to be addressing around wills. The Kentucky MOST Coalition is a great resource to find documents, also to find tools to be having these conversations. We also host a variety of education events for providers and the public. And then the Conversation Project, which I mentioned, is a really great resource. They have a variety of tools that help people reflect on their values and share those values with other people. They have them for just people, any stage of their life. And then they have specific resources for people that that have dementia or other cognitive issues that it might be challenging to think about or articulate these values. And it has some different ways to kind of elicit those conversations. So these are some really easy resources that are to access, and they are all available free online. I'll put my name and email address in the chat. I think everybody here probably has that already, but if you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And Brenda, that is a great question. The slides will be available through iEcho. So after today's session, I'll get that uploaded onto iEcho. So you will be able to have access to this or any other sessions we've hosted in the past. So I do look forward to the conversation during the discussion period. So please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask now or later.
Thanks so much, Justin. So we are taking questions, or you said ask now?
So we'll wait until the end. I saw the, yeah.
Okay. All right. All right, on to our next panel presenter. We have Katheryn Higgins from Thrivent Financials. And Katheryn Higgins is a 21-year licensed veteran in the financial services industry. Her business specializes in retirement planning for individuals, families, small businesses, and long-term care insurance. Katheryn's passion for this topic is inspired by her personal experience. Glad to have you, Katheryn, with us today. And I'm going to give you the mic.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. First of all, you can tell by my background that I'm waiting for spring there. You see all the green and you see the sunshine. I have had enough of winter. Second thing I want to say is my comments are not just for aging. My comments apply to everyone on this telecast. You don't have to be a certain age. My opinion is we're all aging if we're living. Anyway, I'm going to talk about a will, a power of attorney, and a healthcare surrogate. I'm going to do that in the context of a very personal experience I had in 2015, just 10 years ago. And I can probably do this without getting emotional, but if I do, please give me a little bit of grace. That Christmas, my brother, I have a picture of him. We don't have a picture of him today. I took a picture of him sitting there on the bed smiling. And 1 month and 1 day later, January 26th of 2015, he was standing 1 minute and he was in the floor the very next minute. He had a massive stroke. So, we went to the hospital and he was in intensive care. He had a respirator down his throat, or he was intubated, so he couldn't speak and he was not conscious. Well, I had talked to our 98-year-old father and I said, we'll get him stabilized. We'll bring him home and take care of him. And my 98-year-old father said, yes, yes, yes. Well, I was at the hospital till about 4 a.m. that morning, and I went home to take care of my father until I could get someone to sit with him and then get back to the hospital about 9 o'clock. Within that 5-hour period, his daughter had shown up and said, discontinue his life support. If he breathes on his own, he breathes on his own. And I get his life insurance. The problem with that statement is, number one, we hadn't seen her in a couple of years. She doesn't even show up for Thanksgiving dinner because she said she overslept. Number two, she didn't contact me or contact our father to even discuss it. She made that decision on her own. So, cut to the chase, they discontinued my brother's life support system, and my brother died. And it was very hard on my father. My father cried, and I've only seen my father cry maybe once in my life, and he was 98 when he died. Okay, so the whole point of this is, number one, I had talked to my brother, let's get some life insurance, let's get a will. And he's like, no, I don't need that. So obviously, he didn't have a will. He didn't feel like doing that. Number two, he didn't have a power of attorney. A power of attorney says, who speaks for you if you can't speak for yourself? He couldn't speak for himself because he had a ventilator down his throat and he was unconscious. Now, at the point that he died, basically, the power of attorney goes away and then everything reverts to the will and the person who is the executor of the will. And then the third part was the healthcare surrogate to express his wishes about whether he wanted to continue or not. So those things were missing, and there was nothing my father or my brother could do for himself, or I could really do for him. A person that we hadn't seen in multiple years all of a sudden showed up at the hospital, was in charge. And apparently this is pretty common. Since I've gone through this, I found out that this is not uncommon. Basically, if there are assets involved and a person becomes incapacitated in some way or the other, people show up and they take charge. So my whole point is, let's just say something happens to you and you're incapacitated. Who do you want to be in charge? You don't want anyone that just shows up to be in charge, like an ex-husband or a brother-in-law. Who do you want to be in charge? The other part of this is, I mentioned that I was my brother and I were both taking care of our 98-year-old father, and then my brother died. We had to take my father to the hospital because of pneumonia, And my father never made me power of attorney, and he had his reasons for doing that. So I got to the hospital, and they didn't feel like treating him because they thought he was dying. And my point was, I don't care if he's dying, I want him treated. And they said, well, are you his power of attorney? I said, well, no, I'm not. So I persevered, and we got him treated, and my father lived another 2 years. But the whole thing is, when I talk to my clients, they'll say, oh, my husband will do that, or my wife will do that. You don't want your spouse or your significant other to go through that. You want to be able to roll out that piece, that document. There you go. Well, my imaginary document here between my hands, and say, this is what he or she wants. Do it. You don't want to go through what I went through with my father's doctor. They went after me with 2x4s, but I persisted, and my father ended up outliving my brother. My brother was 55 when he died. My father was 98. Now, I'll just make a small point there. We mentioned long-term care insurance. People think long-term care insurance is just for old people. It isn't. In my case, my brother was 55, my father was 98. If I had been able to take my brother home and take care of him, I would have had two men in the house who could not walk, and I would have, okay, thank you for that reminder. I would have had two men in a house that could not walk, and I would have needed some help to take care of them. So both my 55-year-old brother and my 98-year-old father could have used long-term care insurance, and it would have been a huge, huge help to me. I have that conversation with people, and I get some interesting answers. A 68-year-old man said to me, well, my mother will take care of me. And I said to him, well, how old's your mother? Well, his mother's 91. I thought, okay, we'll see how that works. So the first part of it is, do you have a will? And whenever I do my seminars, maybe 10% of the people will raise their hands and say, yes, they have a will. Okay. Number one is a will. 1A is, how old is the will? Is the will up to date? The last time I looked at a will for one of my clients, most of the people were already dead. The will had not been updated in maybe 10 years. So you need to have your will updated, number one. Second of all, I talked about the power of attorney. Who speaks for you if you can't speak for yourself? And then the healthcare surrogate, where you say what you want. Do you want to keep on living? Do you not want to keep on living? And who do you want to have charge over your care? The other thing I would be adamant about is, you need to have these conversations now while it's a casual conversation. Don't wait till somebody's in the emergency room, everybody's running around, everybody's hysterical. Those decisions are already made. Those are legal documents that you have and that you can pull out and present to the doctors right then and there. And there's no confusion. That's what you need to do. I'm trying to think if I have any other point that I want to make. Prior to 10 years ago, I had a will, but I didn't have a power of attorney and healthcare surrogate. I have those now. And don't think you're too young to do that. Every day, there's a smash up on the Waterston Expressway. I travel I-64 East to Lexington. There's a smash up on I-64 East or an I-64 West coming back to Louisville. I cannot tell you how many people put it off. You put it off, and then all of a sudden you need it and you don't have it. And in the case of my brother, and I talked to him about this, I'm in this business. He needed it, but he didn't have it. But it was too late, and I couldn't save his life. So on that, I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, but things happen. And on that note, I guess I'll conclude right now.
Thank you, Katheryn. Thank you also for sharing your personal history with that. Brings it very real to us. All right, now we have Ada Rothrock. Okay. And she's from Archel Heady and Son Funeral Home. And Ada Rothrock has provided compassionate care to families in the Louisville area for 3 decades. Heady's experience in banking and hospice care and senior living has led her to serving families with expertise, transparency, and honesty when making lifelong decisions for their burial or cremation needs. When she's not serving her family, she's spending time with her two teenage boys, enjoying the outdoors and living life to the fullest. Thank you, Ada. I hand the mic to you.
Thank you so much. Wow, we are talking about adulting today. All of these amazing topics. It is summing it all up, acting like adults. So yes, my name is Ada Rothrock, and I'm with Archel Heady Funeral Home, and I've been in this industry for 5.5 years now. And what brought me to this was an amazing decade of my life working at Hospice Health and going through a end of life situation with my own mother. I thought I was doing everything right with her when I had her on hospice care for almost a year. And we were prepared for her death. It was the most beautiful experience of my life, other than the birth of my kids. But we never talked about her funeral. And when she died, it was a train wreck. The beautiful experience of her death turned into a nightmare because I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My dad was worn out, and we had to make some very tough decisions for my mother. And we got through that. I had my dad do his pre-arrangement, and I did mine at the age of 47. Single mom, 2 kids. And I was like, wow, what if something happened to me? I would not want my children to have to make these decisions. So that brought me here. And it's something that I never would have expected, but it's the most amazing gift that I can provide to our families by educating them about pre-planning. Because what now? If you had died last night, would your family know what to do today? Would they know how you wanted to be remembered? And where would they start? At the time of death, that's not when anybody wants to shop for a funeral home, because it is about protecting the ones that you love. We plan for so many things in our life. We're planning our advanced care documents. We're doing our living will and our power of attorney and our trust and our estate plans and all of these amazing things. Well, why are we doing that? It's to protect ourselves and to protect the ones that we love. And it doesn't make sense to pre-plan for the inevitable. Planning can protect the ones that you love from having to make some very, very stressful decisions on the worst day of their life. As I said, when my mom died, it was a train wreck. It was a 3-ring circus. None of us could decide on anything, and we overspent. We put my mother in a casket that she probably would not have liked because she had to have the best, and that wasn't her. And to this day, I still wonder, did I do the right thing for her? And when you have to make these decisions on a very hard day, and you overpay, you overspend. One of the benefits of pre-planning in advance is that you're locking in today's cost of the arrangements, because as with anything, the cost of life just keeps going up. The cost of caskets, the cost of cemetery, the cost of embalming, the cost of everything that comes along with anything that we want to do just keeps going up. And people feel, they may assume that pre-planning your celebration of life is a lot of work. Well, it doesn't have to be. When we talk, we focus on, again, what matters most, and encourage you to have these conversations with your loved ones in advance. How do you want to be remembered? What do you want your service to say about your life? And do you want to be buried or cremated? I probably prearrange about 85% cremations today. There's a lot of reasons behind people choosing to be cremated, but it's the way of the world. And we can pre-plan anything. The most important step too is, record your wishes. When we do your funeral pre-plan, we are going to be talking big picture. We're going to be choosing caskets or urns. Do you want to have your cremated remains permanently memorialized? And something that I like to give my families when we do pre-planning is a personal planning guide. It's your own journal where you can specifically drill down on what you want. What kind of music do you want? What do you want to wear? Do you want food at your service? Who do you want your pallbearers to be? So this personal planning guide is a huge tool that we can use. And again, the most important thing, again, talking about all of this advanced planning, one of the biggest features, again, of securing your pre-arrangements is that you are locking in today's pricing and you don't have to pay for it all at one time. At the time of death, you've got one choice. Your family has one choice, and that's it. It has to be paid for. But when you pre-plan, you can customize your own payment options to fit your budget. Because, everything that we're doing, all of these conversations that we're having, a part of this adulting is it's a wise decision to show your family that you care. It truly provides with everything that you're doing, your family with peace of mind, taking that financial burden off of your family and ensure that your wishes are being reflected. And there are things to look for in a provider. There's some extra benefits that Dignity Memorial provides with your pre-arrangement. First and foremost, we provide bereavement and grief support for our families. We have opportunities for national relocation. We don't know where we may live in 5 to 10, 15 years, whenever. So one of the biggest benefits when you pre-arrange with our company, you have national transferability. So when you're looking at funeral homes, you're going to go to probably the funeral home that has provided care for your family in the past. But it's okay to look at other locations too to see what their benefits are. And VA benefits. A common misconception is that the VA pays for everything, and they don't. There are some amazing veteran burial benefits that are available. Most importantly would be with an honorable discharge and a DD 214. You could be eligible for complimentary burial for your casket or your urn at a veteran cemetery. And I would be more than happy to answer any questions and provide some additional resource for that. And thank you all for attending this opportunity to learn a little bit more about this thing called life and all of this adulting stuff that we have to do.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ada. And now I'm going to pass this to Barbara Gordon, I think, who's going to be our, where did Barbara go?
I'm right here.
Barbara, I'm going to pass it to you.
I know the squares do move around.
I was like, what happened?
So good afternoon, everyone. I first want to just let our presenters know how much I appreciate you and sharing this information with us today. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart for a variety of reasons, including personal experience. And I really appreciate you all sharing your own personal experiences with this topic. And of course, the operative term that each of you used is planning, planning, planning. But of course, life happens. And I think I heard a couple of you talk about this adulting thing that we have to do. And I appreciate that as well, because we do have several students with us today. And I know that often if you're not like 50 and older, you may not think that this is an important topic for you to engage in, but it is critical and important for everyone. So the first question that I'd like to ask you all, and I'd like for each of you to respond to this, because it's not always straightforward and it's not always easy. So what are the key barriers that you would like to share with us today preventing individuals from having these conversations with their loved ones and healthcare providers? And we'll start with you, Justin.
The key barriers to preventing these conversations.
Yes.
So I think the first one is that you think you're always going to have more time. I think so. I think that coupled with, in my judgment, maybe a fear of something around disclosing what's most intimate and vulnerable about ourselves, and admitting that a person that we love might not be in a physical form anymore. I think that, just that. I talked about my experience with my grandmother. My grandmother, the last time we hung out, I was 25. We had lunch. We were on the way home. I dropping her off, and she was like, "Oh yeah, and here's where blah 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 is," And it's like I could feel myself I can feel back to that time of like, "Okay, Grandma, I love you. I got to go to work."
Mhm.
So assuming that A, I was uncomfortable, and B, I thought I had, I'd be able to revisit this at some point. So I think for myself, I think those are the two big barriers I see.
Thank you. Katheryn?
It's just kicking the can down the road. Every person that I serve, I bring this up to. And people have some interesting things to say to me. And I struggle to keep a safe, I mean, not a safe, but a straight face. But look at my brother. He was standing one minute, he was in the floor the next, unconscious. He never retained consciousness. He didn't have a chance to say yes, no, maybe. That was it. And like I said, the things I'm talking about apply to everyone on this call. You get in your car, they're drunk drivers. All of a sudden you're unconscious because you've been hit head on. I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, but you have to be prepared. And the whole thing about being prepared is you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for your loved ones.
Right.
It
Thank
was
you.
extremely, extremely taxing for myself. And with my 98-year-old father, he died 6 months after my brother did. Of course, he was 98 years old, but that's what killed him. Things could have gone very, very differently if my brother had listened to me and hadn't just blown me off like he normally does.
Right. Thank you very much. What about you, Ada? What barriers do you find preventing people from planning?
It's human nature to focus on the present and let the future kind of take care of itself. Time is a luxury. And I think probably the biggest barrier that I have is, oh, we don't need that right now. We don't need to talk about that right now. When it's so much easier to have these conversations with your loved ones before there's an illness, before there is a critical situation that we're dealing with. It's all about being proactive rather than reactive. And time is precious. That's probably my biggest barrier.
Yeah, I can sense that. And just to follow up, Ada, can you give some examples of experiences you've had with families when their loved one did not pre-plan funeral arrangements?
Being in the funeral home daily now and watching the experiences with families that have a prearrangement versus the experience of a family without a prearrangement, with and without, it's night and day. Those families that have prearranged and have had those conversations up front, um, they're not here for hours. They're not here bickering. They're not here trying to make these decisions on what did mom or dad want, or how are we going to pay for this?
Mhm.
The experience for the family is night and day.
Right. Thank you. So again, many of us work in this field and have worked with older adults, people across the lifespan, old and young. And in hearing your responses to what are the barriers, really, it sounded to me like you were just literally saying there aren't any quote unquote barriers except for our own selves and inhibitions. And sometimes, we wish it was that simple. So I'd like to just shift just gears just a little bit and ask each of you if you can share from your experience, especially, but also your perspective, what role does economic disparity play in accessing advanced care planning resources and literally engaging in advanced care planning? And then after that, if you could just talk a little bit about how you think, because many of us work in the healthcare field or in behavioral health, clinical care, et cetera. How can healthcare systems and professionals ensure that there is equitable access to advanced care planning, all of the different aspects of it, including, preparing for a funeral? Justin, we'll start with you.
Oh gosh. So I'm just going to tell on myself a little bit. I have a very specific um, a body disposition plan. Like I would like to be buried. I'd like to have a natural burial, and the only place close to here is in Loretto, which is near Bardstown, and it's an investment. It's a financial investment for me to make, to get that formalized. And so like I can totally recognize that there are aspects of this piece, regarding especially the estate planning and the body disposition piece that are financial barriers. In terms of like the advanced care planning piece, in terms of just a living will, and I'm saying just a living will, I think that it's a really important document. I think some of it is time. I recognize how much time is a resource, and also access to information. It's amazing to me. I mentioned in my talk that, the Conversation Project has engaged over 700,000 people, in the conversation. That's still a drop in the bucket compared to our entire population. And so I think the community outreach piece, the access to the internet, to access to having time to think about this, time can feel like a luxury. So I think like all that plays together in this. So lowering the barriers, I think, looking for, I think about the work that's being done through the for Advanced Care, creating community outreach and community engagement is really going to be a big piece of this. Finding ways to low cost or no cost estate planning, like we have our relationship with the Brandeis School of Law, finding ways that you can get people to do some of this planning in a way that is, meeting people where they are is really critical.
Right. And I did hear you talk a little bit about just, the Conversation Project and some of, the things that need to occur is just having that conversation. And I think both Ada and Katheryn spoke a little bit to a barrier just being ourselves and not being able to have that conversation. But again, life is not the same for everyone. So I'll continue that line of question with you, Katheryn. What role does economic disparity play in accessing advanced care planning resources? You may have some experiences yourself with the people that you serve, some of your customers, or just generally people in the community. People who cannot access your service because of the economic issues that they may be experiencing.
Well, first of all, there is no one who cannot access my services. No one.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Give me a call, when that cannot access my services. When you're talking about paying for final arrangements, that's what life insurance is for. And remember when everyone's granny had life insurance and she paid $1 or less every week, and the guy came along every week to collect that. Somehow that went by the wayside, but life insurance is very, very affordable. You work with someone like me to figure out what's in your budget to do that, because that was the whole thing with my brother. I said, look, what if I die? What if you die before I do? I need money to bury you. Whoa, blah, 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 blah. Cut to the chase. He died before I did, and we still ended up paying for his burial. Uh, uh, there's no excuse. Talk to someone, and if someone doesn't want to speak to you because of an economic barrier, you're talking to the wrong person. This is a service I've been doing for 21 years. I talk to everyone. Now, if you don't have any money, that's fine. If you have a lot of money, that's fine too. I can help everyone. And, my whole family has been in the service business. My father, well, I still speak of him in the present tense, even though he's been dead 10 years. My father is a mortician. He was in the service business. So people die and they have not properly planned. My mother was an elementary school teacher. She was in the service profession. So, our family serves, and, I'm very close to my family. I'm very close to my community, and that's what I'm here for. And let me just say one more thing, because I don't want to go on and on. What you don't plan for becomes a burden to your family. I cannot tell you, somebody dies and I see kids on the off ramp, help us put Joe Paul to rest. You don't want your children to do that. You don't want your grandchildren to do that. Just pay a monthly premium. Call me, I'll price something. We'll find something that you can afford. But you don't want your kids or your grandkids or your nieces and nephews on the off ramp saying, put Joe Paul to rest. No, you just don't want that for your family.
Thank you. So Ada, again, been in this space a long time, do some of this work myself in various capacities professionally as well as a minister. So, I keep hearing that this is something that we must do, we have to do, but people aren't doing it, right? People still aren't doing it. I think Justin gave the statistic earlier. So in the funeral care business, what do you do when you encounter a family who's, not economically prepared for burying a loved one? How do you facilitate in that space? And if you don't mind, also just, add to your response. We obviously we need to do more to educate and communicate with our communities, with individuals. That's one of the reasons why we're having this session today, right?
Yes.
So how can the funeral care business do, more? I'm not going to necessarily say a better job, but just do more to make sure that the community knows that it doesn't have to be economically challenging to plan for your funeral.
Right. Yeah. We have to meet our families where they are, emotionally, spiritually, financially, and coming up with a pre-plan to meet those needs is the utmost importance, because again, it's all about reducing or relieving the family of the burden, emotionally and financially. So, I do a lot of pre-planning to help with Medicaid eligibility. So those are options too, to secure your pre-planning for that Medicaid eligibility. And I work with, families and nursing facilities across the county, across the state, actually, to do that. So, we can't be too young, we can't be too old, but we can be too late. A very wise friend told me that one time, and it made sense. And even though you may feel like it is going to cost way more than you can afford, we can work with that. We can figure out what your budget is to meet your needs, because it's so important, and the price just is going to keep going up.
Yes, great. Thank you. So there are some comments in the chat if our participants want to attend to that. And then we also have a question. So Deborah had her hand up a little bit earlier. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute, Deborah, and ask your question. And then I have a couple more questions before we conclude and transition to the next part of our session today. Deborah Moss.
No, I
What's
didn't
your
have
question?
I didn't have a question. I had a I was going to tell you my story about I was one of those people who didn't plan and I had an aneurysm in 1999. Died, resuscitated, but I had already had insurance from my retirement that would bury me. But I never thought that I would ever get sick. That's what I was. My
Mhm.
point was,
Thank
people don't
you.
think that they'll ever get that
Right,
sick that
right.
would happen, and that was my comment.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And
Mhm.
again, um, I think it's been said a couple of times today, life happens, right? And sometimes life interferes with us doing the things that we need to do to plan. But the other thing that happens is death. It will happen to all of us. So we definitely want to be in the position to be able to plan appropriately. And I think our presenters today, but I want to go into another area where I know there are challenges and potential barriers to advanced care planning and reaching these particular communities and audiences. So I would like to ask you all to just share again from your experience, personally and professionally, how you understand cultural beliefs and traditions to shape this conversation that is held or not held, and what are some strategies for us to be culturally sensitive in these conversations in these places, and what partners we might want to work with to help us to overcome some of those cultural barriers that exist. And I'll start with you, Katheryn.
I'm a little unclear about the cultural barriers. Can you explain, please?
Yeah, so we come from many cultures, and we do know that there are some cultural beliefs and experiences that inhibit uh, having these type conversations about planning for death. So you may not have had any experiences in that particular space, and that's fine. We can move on to Justin and Ada. But if you have anything to contribute, please share.
I'll just say this: whatever you don't do, it doesn't go undone. It has to be picked up by someone else and done. It doesn't go undone. It has to be, and you don't want it to be picked up by someone who you don't want it to be picked up for. You don't want it to be picked up by someone who doesn't have the resources. But, when you first say cultural, I talk about my father. He knew how to do Muslim burials. He knew how to do Buddhist burials. So he actually went to seminars to learn all of that. So he was up on that. And just to brag on him a little bit, because he is my father, when he was 98 and he died, he had a current mortician's license. So he knew all that. So, probably up to a couple of months before he died, you could have come and talked to him. And I would have asked him if it, if he were still around. I don't know if that's exactly answering your questions, but
That's
start the
okay.
conversation. And if the person doesn't want to have the conversation with you, you're talking to the wrong person. Find someone else. Keep
All
on
right,
digging,
great.
keep on asking. I
Ada,
mean, this is
you
America.
take a minute. Ada, can you take a minute and respond to that question?
Yeah, I mean, again, I kind of agree with Katheryn a little bit. Just have the conversation. As far as the funeral industry goes, we are providing a service at the time of death, and no matter race, religion, culture, anything, we're all gonna die. And you just have to have that conversation with your loved ones, your best friend, your clergy, someone, so someone has an idea of what you want.
Great. Thank you. Justin.
So this is something that I've learned a lot of things not to do, Barbara. And part of that has been just through trial and error, through hosting community events. But I feel like I've learned a lot from the Conversation Project in particular, particularly related to their faith-based initiatives, and learning how to find cultural leaders or congregational leaders or other community leaders that can help engage in this conversation and show the importance and also understand the nuances that I'm not going to understand if the community is not, if I'm not part of that community. Um, I was part of a conversation around, so I talked about the most form. I was part of a conversation with a group from New York City that had a really strong Hasidic Jewish population. And they talked about how important it was to have a rabbi involved in some of these end of life conversations. And so that was like the first time I'd ever really heard, something very, very specific that that's really far away from my everyday life. And so I think developing relationships with people that are leaders in a community can be really helpful. But also, I mean, when we always come back to the cultural humility piece, recognizing that I'm going to miss a lot of subtle nuances and learning how to be humble in that area is really a key piece of this. But I think a lot of it is really based on relationships.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to ask you all a concluding question, but before then, someone has a really practical question that I don't want to get lost. It's in the chat. So would you say that the first step is to get life insurance, and or what would you do if you don't have life insurance and want to do pre-planning? So that's a question that someone has. I'd love it if our presenters would respond to that question in the chat. All right, you can respond to her question in the chat and everybody can see it. What I like to do is ask you all in conclusion to just share 2 things that you want the participants today to remember from all of the conversation we've had today about advanced care planning. And there may be some overlap, but what are the most important things that they need to remember today? Justin, we'll start with you.
I think the first thing that I'm really aware of is focusing on values, focusing on, what matters most to the person who you would want to honor if they couldn't speak for themselves. And then the second piece is there are lots of tools out there, but really kind of keeping each of the pieces in mind, just starting somewhere and getting the conversation going. I think those are the 2 things that come to mind right off the bat.
So, Katheryn.
I'm sorry, I was responding to the chat. What was your question? I'm sorry.
So,
you tell me to respond in the chat?
Yes, and you can continue to do that after you respond to this. Just 2 things that you think is critical for the participants who have heard you all today to remember as we get ready to conclude our conversation about advanced care planning.
You think it's about you. It's not about you. It's about your family and and everyone who cares about you. So that's number 1. After you're gone, you're gone. But what do you leave in the wake for your family to deal with? You don't want your children, your grandchildren, your whole family to be in a dither. It's not about you, really.
Anything else? That was 1.
And what was the other? What's the question again? I'm sorry.
Just 2 things. So it's not about you, it's about who you leave behind.
Right.
Is there anything else you want people to remember that's critical, potentially even from your line of business?
I don't know. They were asking about life insurance.
There is a question that I have that I think you will respond to, and is in my mind a really important question that sort of put what your first point into perspective. So what happens to a person's estate, or quote unquote non-estate, after they die if they haven't planned for it?
If they haven't planned for it, it can go and become the property of the state of Kentucky.
Right.
Now, do you want that for all of your assets, or do you want your assets to go to your family? Governor Beshear will not even write you a thank you note, but they will they will assume your assets.
Thank you. Yes, that's a really, I think, critical and a practical point to make, and it definitely relates to that first statement that you made, that is not about you per se, it's about those you leave behind, as well as all your assets, or your estate, or even if you don't have a whole lot of money, most people have something, and they want it to go to those people that they love. All
Well,
right,
put that in
Ada.
a will and designate the beneficiaries. If you designate beneficiaries, it doesn't have to go through probate. If
That's
you have to go
right.
through probate, then you have to get an attorney involved potentially. But if it goes to the beneficiary, there it is right there in the will, and that's very simple. Those are things
Right.
that you can do and you should do.
Thank you. Ada, the
So
two things you want people to remember when they leave here today.
have the conversation with your family. Make sure that they know what you want. Even if it's down to whether or not you want to be buried or cremated. If you think about doing it, do it. Don't put it off, because it's so much easier to make these decisions without emotion. It's so much easier to make these decisions when there's not an illness that we're contending with, or if we're in an imminent situation. So, do it when you're young. Take care of these plans when you're young. Yeah, it's just gonna um, save a lot of heartache and a lot of money.
Great. Thank you very much. I'd just like to share one other thing that I think is important to remember. Some of you may already have many of the items that our presenters introduced or shared with you today, or introduced to you today. Uh, One thing that is important to note is that advanced care planning is not stagnant. If you're young and you do start that process now, it's very important to revisit. If you're old, my age, etc., it's still important to revisit your advanced care planning documents on a routine and regular basis, because things do change, including your wishes might change. So always look at that information more than once. Don't just do it. I think one of our presenters even gave an example of that, where a will or a document was 10 years old and not necessarily relevant at the time that it was needed. So I thank our presenters today. I really appreciate all the knowledge and information that you have shared with us. If you still have questions or comments, don't hesitate to continue to put those in the chat. And I appreciate our presenters for responding to that one personal question that was asked. At this time, I'm going to turn it back over to my colleague, Pam Yankee Love.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was a great panel discussion. I learned so much. All righty. So we are now moving to our Kentucky Coalition for Healthy Communities conversation and meeting. And I think I'm going to go on and pass it to Mona Huff. Hi, Mona.
Okay, this has been a great, great presentation, and I'm real excited about the things that we learned, and I hope that you are as well. And so our purpose of the Kentucky Coalition for Healthy Communities is to train and empower stakeholders and community members to provide hope and education for their communities. So what we have found today is some education and hope for our communities. So if you want to go on to the next slide, I want us to talk about that a little bit. How are you going to share this information? I think it's a waste of an hour and a half of our time if we come to this meeting and we say, oh my goodness, that was a good meeting. I learned so much. And that's as far as it ever goes. So what are some of the things that you think that you can share with the community now, since you came to this particular session? Just unmute or write some things in the chat, and Pam will help me keep up with that.
I'll say something. If you want me to come out and do a lunch and learn or a talk, I'd be happy to do that. Just give me a call. I keep on saying I tell as many people as I can as fast as I can.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have me come out.
Okay.
Your women's group, your church, whatever. Have me come out.
Okay. Okay, someone said they learned that you need more than just a will. Yes, that's something really good to know, isn't it? Anything else? Okay, so let's go ahead and continue to the next slide, Justin.
Amanda wrote in the chat, this message is very timely because two of my clients were just asking about POAs, wills, and life insurance. So now she's going to be able to direct them.
Good. So glad to hear that.
And then Misty indicated that scheduling sessions to pass along to residents and their families.
Yes, yes. And she happens to be a director in an assisted living. So some of you folks that know people in that situation, say, I know a way that you can get some really good information. And I'm going to give you some more toward the end. Okay. Anyone else want to add to that before we go to the next slide?
Tiffany indicated that she needs to investigate more about long-term care.
Call me.
All righty. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Okay, so also during this coalition, I'd like to give you the opportunity to share any events that you might have coming up. If anyone has something that they would like us to know about, mention it. If you have a flyer or something that you would like to go out to this group, you can send it to Justin and he will send it when he sends out all the other information. And also, we like to give people an opportunity. If you have a concern in your community that maybe we could help you with, let us know that. So I'll just be quiet for a moment. And again, you can unmute or you can put in the chat.
While you're being quiet, I wanted to say, and I should have mentioned this before, make sure any documents that you already have in place, the beneficiaries are up to date. I have talked to people where the husband is now deceased. And so now the person has a second husband, but they didn't up to date the beneficiaries. So the first wife got all of the money. It wasn't a good situation.
Yeah. And I know that's been said several times to update. So that needs to be really just put it on your birthday that you're going to look at every birthday and see if anything needs to be changed. You should have a copy of it in your own home.
You'd be surprised.
Okay, Ada says, if anyone here needs a speaker, please let her know. She would love to help our communities learn these things. Justin, what did you say? I'm having such a hard time reading.
Just the registration is open for the 2025 Optimal Aging Conference, which is May 15th and 16th.
Okay. There's going to be a lot of good things at that as well to teach us about aging. And I actually will be doing a presentation on a living celebration for those who decide they don't want a funeral, but they want to be able to be with their loved ones while they still know who they are. So there's going to be a lot of good things at that optimal aging. So hope that you'll plan that. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. I want to share some things with you that we do at Trager. First of all, I want to talk to you about our Flourishing Together class. This is a 10-week class, and our participants will break up into teams and have their own little family, and we're going to learn ways to be healthier, become more active, and to take control of our health conditions. We believe that aging is an opportunity, not a resignation that we're going to have all of these chronic care situations. And so we're trying to learn how to manage and prevent these. We are kind of in the middle of one now, but we'll be starting a new one this spring. So if you're interested, just let me know. I'll be glad to add you to our list. Okay, the next one, please. Okay, so my health matters and so does yours. Actually, we have been in a all month, every Monday night. We've been talking about these things that we've talked about today, and we've taken things a little bit at a time and had specialists come in so that our community members and our students and our professionals that come to this meetings on Monday nights could talk about it at length. So this coming Monday night, we're going to be having Amy Daughtery from the Blue Cross Elder Law speaking to us on wills, guardianships, and health surrogates. And that's every Monday night from 6:30 to 7:30 by Zoom. And as you can see, the following week, we're going to be talking about the most forms. Dr. Josephine Combs from our clinic will be speaking to us. And that's ending about a 5-week session that we've had, but we'll be visiting these things again later because we do random topics according to what our participants want. And of course, our participants do change. So if you say, boy, I would like to have been part of that, just hang on, we'll probably do it again. And then of course, I know that Justin always is interested in what we can do with ECHO that people want. So go on to the next slide, Justin. So I just want to share with you an event that I'm a part of. We do a walk with the doc on the first Monday, or excuse me, I'm so used to Mondays, the first Saturday of every month at 9 a.m. at a local park here in Henry County. And what that means is that we have a doctor that walks with us. And at the beginning of the walk, he does about a 5-minute little health tip, different tip every month. And then he just walks with us and talks with us, and it helps us feel more comfortable with our healthcare providers. And that's what we want our folks to do. We want all of you to understand that you're the most important part of that healthcare team, and you should be able to talk and feel comfortable with that person. We know that walking is one of the best things you can do for your overall health, and so we try to engage in that in every situation that we can. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. All righty, before I do the slide, I would just like to say a couple little things about today's session. Again, I'm kind of like Justin. I've been a part of these types of things for a number of years, and Barbara, very, very dear to my heart, not only professionally, spiritually, but personally. And I always tell folks, by you making your arrangements and writing down what you want and make sure it's done in a proper format is the most precious gift that you can ever give your family. Don't worry about how much money you can give them, but worry about how you can make this transition a little easier for them. Have the conversation. Let us normalize talking about death. And I know some people, to them, that's just a really hard topic. My mother was a little bit superstitious. She thought about if you talked about death, and then it was certainly going to happen to somebody. And of course, it's happening to somebody every day anyway, but she didn't recognize that at that point in her life. So somehow or another, in very kind ways, recognizing the person's value and what matters to them, as Justin brought out so eloquently, let's have these conversations and let's make life a little easier, and let us grow gracefully, knowing that death does not have to be something really horrible, but a beautiful, sacred time if we prepare ourselves for that. So our goal as a coalition, and as part of this ECHO, is that we, all of us, will become effective state coalitions, people, individuals, working with community members and community-based organizations to empower our state to become a healthier and compassionate people. So let's be compassionate as we're talking to them about health, but let's also be compassionate about making death a more comfortable subject. In order for us to do these kind of things, we're going to have to practice, and we need to practice our self-care, and we need to model healthy behaviors to our families, our coworkers, and members of our communities. And if we can talk about death in a positive way and not making it sound like this most horrible thing that ever can happen, perhaps that will make it easier for the rest of our families as well. So with that, I'm going to yield it back to Justin.
Thank you, Mona. So just want to remind you that March 21st at noon, we're going to have Restorative Sleep, a vital pillar for health and longevity with Kristen Nisus. I have on here a registration code. If you are already registered for this session, you are registered for future sessions. So please you'll log back into your account on iEcho to manage that moving forward. Really appreciate everyone being here. I'm going to stop sharing just for a second so I can put the URL in the chat for the survey. We really appreciate your feedback, and we really try to use it to shape this and future sessions. So you can either use the QR code here, or you can refer or come back to the survey through the URL in the chat. So I'm going to hang out if you have any questions. Otherwise, please complete the survey, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And so I'm going to stop recording.